The ruling elite in Britain were known for deporting their own people for years. And as the Industrial Revolution kicked off, huge numbers were deported to places like Australia. The British ruling elite has a worldview, and it can be best summed up as: we are the master race. All of you who are not in our world are just trash. It isn't personal. Now, if you get caught up in their disdain for humanity, then you and yours will be dealt with. Simple. If someone has to hang, then God have mercy on their soul.
Hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on his soul. Proceed.
Once you are of no use to them, then you're out. It's as simple as that. Their contempt or disgust at humanity really picked up a pace after the Industrial Revolution kicked off. You see, you had people leaving rural areas to come into the big cities to find work in factories. Cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, London, Bristol, all the big cities were building factories, and the workers were coming off the land and going into these factories. And as a result, slums started to build up all around, and things just got really chaotic. The ruling elite were outraged. Something had to be done. What the English elite had stumbled across, purely by accident, was the phenomenon of expanding the economy through the use of surplus labour. You see, there was a lot of surplus labour on the land in England, and it had to be deployed. Once it was deployed in the factories, it was creating huge amounts of profits. The societies or industries were expanding at a rate of knots, so were cities. So this was causing a huge problem. Something had to be done with the people. The people were the problem. Do you see? There were thousands of children running wild, pickpocketing. There was no schooling. Parents couldn't afford to keep them. There was a huge amount of prostitution, begging, thieving, violence, alcohol, drug use. So the ruling elite were deporting as many of them as they could to America initially until the War of Independence, then to Australia. They were hanging people, they were hanging children as young as 12, being hanged. They were doing everything they can to try and suppress the population. It was a nightmare for them. And in that crucible of rapid economic expansion, the ruling elite of this country learned to despise the people. They despised the common man and his progeny, those children running around barefoot, dirty faces. They tried to employ the children in factories. They sent them down chimneys. They sent them down into the coal pits to dig out coal with pit ponies. They did everything they could to try and deal with humanity, the humanity that they found disgusting. Now, where do we come in? We African people, either those of us who were shipped into the Caribbean and the Americas, or those of us who remained on the continent of Africa. Where do we come into this story? Well, obviously through slavery and colonialisation. The ruling elite in this country, in England or in Britain, have always resorted to making their wealth through the extraction of labour of other people. And we Africans were the first group that they took in terms of large numbers. Yes, they did it to the Scots, they did it to the Irish, but we were the first mass group. So we came into their story as surplus labour, first into the Caribbean with sugarcane, and then sugarcane was then processed in factories in the Caribbean. There were factories in the Caribbean early on, much earlier on than in Britain. And then also they were using us as plantations on the continent and also in mines. So scroll on to the Second World War. The ruling elite again needs more labour. They need labour to rebuild the country after the Second European War, let's be correct. So we come into this country and we're here to rebuild the country.
Find work. Discouraged but full of hope, they sail for Britain. Citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent.
Now, by the end of the 90s, the ruling elite had a choice. They could either invest in African communities in this country, what I call the internal colonies of the ruling elite. We are part of the internal colonies in the UK. They could invest in the colonies, upskill our community in terms of better education, better skills, better housing, better health outcomes, or they could maintain the internal colonies through over-policing them, particularly over-policing us, imprisoning us, locking us up in mental institutions, deporting us. They could find many ways to suppress our community. So there were the two choices. Either invest on the one hand in our communities and give us a real fighting chance, or police, monitor, suppress, deport our communities on the other hand. And obviously we all know which one they chose. The ruling elite treat their own really badly. You see, during the Industrial Revolution, the people faced intense cruelty and neglect from the ruling elite. They didn't want to uplift those people because they didn't see them as their people. They saw them as a problem to be dealt with. So when they come to us, when they come to the African community in the UK, a colonised community, don't expect any better treatment. Let's be frank, we should expect worse treatment, worse than how they treat the white working class. If you seriously think about what I'm telling you, you'll come to the conclusion that the British elite have been using our labour for 400 years. The health and the well-being of the British elite, the English elite, has been maintained by exploiting the labour of African people, whether in the Caribbean and the Americas or on the continent of Africa or in the UK as cheap labour. That's really the story underneath all this. underneath this nightmare, the story is that we have been exploited. In recent years, the ruling elite have decided that they no longer need our cheap labour. Over the past few decades, the ruling elite have replaced our labour with more efficient Eastern European labour. So we as African people in the UK are effectively obsolete, redundant. So if you're watching this video after December the 2nd, 2020, then there's a strong chance that a group of people who spent the majority of their life in the UK will have been deported back to Jamaica. The ruling elite got their service class in the form of the Tory party, who are in government right now, to organise the deportation. And it really doesn't matter whether the people doing the control of our communities are white or Asian or African. It doesn't matter. The British have always used African and Asian people in the empire to suppress other non-white, non-European people. That's been a hallmark of the empire to promote a class of Africans in the Caribbean, on the continent of Africa, and a class of Asians to do the bidding of the ruling elite. So Priti Patel, Savage Javid, you know, they're just doing as their master tells them. Now, the majority of people who are going to be deported or have been deported by now to Jamaica, all those people served time in prison. For whatever offence, they serve time. If you serve more than a year, you can be deported automatically. If you serve more than 4 years, you will be deported. One young man is being deported after serving 4+ years for dealing or supplying Class A drugs like cocaine. But we should remember that a significant number of the Tory MPs that have passed this automatic law in regards to deporting anybody who's got a conviction of more than a year, a significant number of those Tory MPs have also used Class A drugs and must have supplied Class A drugs to their friends, but none of them are in jail. None of them have had their lives ruined. Do you see, it's shocking. Right now, up and down the country in all the Ivy League universities, all the top-ranking Russell Group universities, there are the ruling elite's children using cocaine. Their lives are not wrecked. They don't get a prison sentence. The police don't search them. They don't stand outside nightclubs in Mayfair and Soho and Chelsea, where the ruling elites, teenagers and young people hang out. They don't stand outside these nightclubs and go through these people's pockets and purses to get the cocaine and charge them with offences. They will never ever be charged with an offence. Whereas this young man who came here under the age of 6 has never been to Jamaica, doesn't have any family in Jamaica, is set to be deported to Jamaica. And he's just going to have to live on the street because he has nothing. They're just going to throw him out on the street for dealing cocaine.